Hi, Ruthie.
Do you know anything about the Syrian refugee crisis?
Slightly familiar with it, but I really don't know that much.
I'm not too aware with the Syrian crisis, but I would like to learn about it.
Now.
No clue what it is. What is that?
De grands yeux amoureux écarquillés, ton visage contre le mien. Certains se sont faiblir, tu sais que je vais sombrer. Certains ne changent pas. Certains se sont faiblir, tu sais que je vais sombrer. Certains ne changent pas. De grands yeux amoureux écarquillés, ton visage contre le mien. Certains se sont faiblir, tu sais que je vais sombrer. Certains ne changent pas.
كل شيء قاد أجمل وأحسن، بس بعد شغلة شهر يعني صار الحروب فوقنا وتعرفين الحال صار مو زين قاد، وانقطع الأكل عنا وصار البرد.
The beginning of the conflict and watched to see how it unfolded. The first shots in the war were fired in March 2011 by Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad against peaceful Arab Spring demonstrators. In July, the protesters start shooting back, and some Syrian troops even defect from the Syrian army to join them. They call themselves the Free Syrian Army, and the uprising becomes a civil war. Extremists from around the region and the world start traveling to Syria to join the rebels. Now, Assad actually encourages this by releasing jihadist prisoners to tinge the rebellion with extremism and make it harder for foreign backers to support them. In January 2012, Al-Qaeda forms a new branch in Syria, Jabhat al-Nusra. Also around that time, Syrian Kurdish groups who had long sought autonomy take up arms and informally secede from Assad's rule in the north. That summer is when Syria becomes a proxy war. Iran, Assad's most important ally, intervenes on his behalf. And by the end of 2012, Iran is sending daily cargo flights and has hundreds of officers on the ground. At the same time, the oil-rich Arab states in the Persian Gulf begin sending money and weapons to the rebels, mainly to counter Iran's influence. Iran steps up its influence in turn in mid-2012 when Hezbollah, a Lebanese militia backed by Iran, invades to fight along Assad. In turn, the Gulf states respond, Saudi Arabia really stepping up this time to send more money and weapons to the rebels, this time through Jordan, who also opposes Assad. By 2013, the Middle East is divided between mostly Sunni powers generally supporting the rebels and Shias generally supporting Assad. That April, the Obama administration, horrified by Assad's atrocities and the mounting death toll, signs a secret order authorizing the CIA to train and equip Syrian rebels. But the program stalls. At the same time, the US quietly urges Arab Gulf states to stop funding extremists, but their requests basically go ignored. In August, the Assad regime uses chemical weapons against civilians, provoking condemnation from around the world.
Men, women, children lying in rows, killed by poison gas. It is in the national security interests of the United States to respond to the Assad regime's use of chemical weapons through a targeted military strike.
Russia proposed on Monday that Syria surrender control over its chemical weapons to the international community for its eventual dismantling to avoid a U.S. military strike.
The U.S. ends up backing down, but the whole thing establishes Syria as a great powers dispute, with Russia backing Assad and the U.S. opposing him. Just weeks later, the first American CIA training and arms reached Syrian rebels. The U.S. is now a participant in the war. In February 2014, something happens that transforms the war. An al-Qaeda affiliate based mostly in Iraq breaks away from the group over internal disagreements. The group calls itself the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or ISIS, and it becomes al-Qaeda's enemy. ISIS mostly fights not Assad, but other rebels and Kurds, carving out a mini-state it calls its caliphate. That summer, it marches across Iraq, seizing territory and galvanizing the world against it. In September, 1 year after US almost bombed Assad, it begins bombing ISIS.
We're moving ahead with our campaign of airstrikes against these terrorists, and we're prepared to take action against ISIL in Syria as well.
That summer, in July, the Pentagon launches its own program to train Syrian rebels, but will only train those who will fight ISIS, not Assad. The program fizzles, showing that America now opposes ISIS more than Assad, but that there's also no like-minded Syrian proxy forces on the ground in Syria. In August, Turkey starts bombing Kurdish groups in Iraq and in Turkey, even as these Kurdish groups are fighting ISIS in Syria. But Turkey doesn't bomb ISIS. This gets to one of the big problems in this conflict. The US sees ISIS as its main enemy, but the US's allies like Turkey and a lot of Middle Eastern states have other priorities. This makes for a lot of unclear and confusing alliances. The next month, in September, Russia intervenes on behalf of Assad, sending a few dozen military aircraft to a long-held Russian base in the country. Russia says it's there to bomb ISIS, but in fact only ends up bombing anti-Assad rebels, including some backed by the US. The next year, Donald Trump wins the White House, vowing to stay out of Syria and signaling that Assad should be able to stay in power. At the end of 2016, Assad, helped by Russian air power and Iranian-sponsored militias, retakes the Syrian city of Aleppo, knocking the rebels out of their last remaining urban stronghold. Then, in spring 2017, Assad once again uses chemical weapons against his people, killing 85, including 20 children. Back in the US, Trump says his attitude towards Syria and Assad has, quote, changed very much due to the attacks. He vows to respond, and within just a few days, the White House launches dozens of Tomahawk missiles that strike an airbase in Syria. This is the first time the United States has directly attacked the Assad regime, and this adds yet another crisscrossing complication to the already multi-dimensional civil war. So as it stands now, Syria is in ruins. Even as Assad recaptures land, the rebellion perseveres, and with outside countries fueling each of the groups, it's clear that there's still no end in sight.
كلهم مي كلهم مي شايف هاي مي هون ياك المي عم تنزل شوف المي ياك المي كيف عم تنزل.
Temperatures here at night in the Bekaa Valley are regularly below freezing, and heavy snowfalls have caused some of the tents refugees are living in to collapse.
وعم نشتغل امبارح الساعة 4 عم نشتغل صح ولا يا علي؟
الساعة 4 بالليل.
الساعة 4 بالليل هسه عم ندقدق بالخيام.
بارها لو ايمات؟
وكمان هبط علينا نهار الثلج. كيف الثلج كيف اللي هبطوا؟ كلها هبطت. لك شو هذا كيف صار؟ لك ها. ما نحن عاملين عائلتين، عاملين مثل برا قاسمينهم اثنين، بس هون بيت اختي. كمان هبطت عليهم، شهلناها كلها سوا.
Do you think some of the girls have sex with the clients in their own time?
Honestly, most of the girls come without sex. They will not make money. You understand?
We might have found one person who's willing to speak to us anonymously. We're on our way to the southern suburbs now. We're not really meant to be filming there, but we're going to go and meet her and hopefully hear her story. Hiba, which isn't her real name, came to Lebanon a few years ago after her husband died fighting in the Syrian army. So what do you do now in Lebanon? How do you make money?
بروح هيك واحد هيك بس مش كل يوم.
Hiba's life in prostitution started when she met a man in her local market. How did it happen?
يحكي معي امزح معه يمزح معي عادي، بعدين وين دخلت معه عرض علي هو يعرفني على أصحابه، وعندي 5 أولاد وشو بدي أتوظف يعني، لبناني ما لاقي يشتغل بهالبلد. بدي يشغلوني إلي.
Do you think these men are taking advantage of you because of the situation that you're in?
مش أكيد يعني بيستغلوني وبيعرفوا وضعي.
If you didn't do this, what would happen to your family and your kids and your life here?
طبعا بدنا نتشرد أكتر كنا، كأنه حلم وحلمته خلص بصير ببلدي.
It doesn't seem like Hiba's going to be going back to Syria anytime soon, and she told me if things get hard enough, she would consider getting a PIM to try and make more money.
the task of coordinating and distributing aid falls on municipalities across the country, and officials have been struggling to keep up with the massive influx of refugees. Local NGOs have stepped in to make up the shortfall in international aid, but it's clearly not enough. As frustration built, the men distributing the blankets said they would come back if the refugees formed a line. They were handing out the aid without the approval of the local government and wanted to avoid a scene that might draw authorities. Tensions are rising in El Marj as the refugee population grows and access to aid becomes even more limited.
أنا بدي جاوبك ما عم يوصلنا شيء بالبلدية رحنا كمان أكلنا قتل وما استلمنا وهون ما عم نستلم مهبوش وجهي ضربوني بالعصاية على ظهري وما صار لي شيء العالم يعني طلع شو خلونا نطلع وجهي شوف وجهي شلون دفعوني حق ما صار لي شيء أنا بدي واسطة
مساعدة من بعيد من قطر ومن الكويت وللسوريين صارت اللبنانيين تستلمها مو السوريين اللبنانية صارت تستلمها الكروت المازوت ما شفنا شيء منهم 1600 كرت ما شفنا شيء منهم عم نروح على البلديه بكشحونا بالعصايات وبالكهرباء وعم يقتلونا ويضربونا طيب نحن مشان شو انه عم يسوي فينا هيك نحن عم نرقد مشان مساعدتنا مو مشان حرام مشان ندفي اولادنا
In the Zaatari refugee camp in Jordan, Asata Mehin met with women and girls who are benefiting from UNFPA's support.
We're involved in the camp to provide services to women and girls. First, to look after their dignity, make sure that they get services. For pregnant women, provide them antenatal care, make sure they deliver safely, make sure their babies are also safe.
And with an estimated 3,000 pregnant women in the camp, these services are vitally important. And though they have fled the conflict, women here are still vulnerable. Already this year, there have been 350 reported cases of gender-based violence. That's why UNFPA provides awareness sessions and safe spaces, where they can discuss how to prevent and how to counter attacks. In Turkey's Nizip camp, run by the Turkish government, UNFPA supplies what is called a dignity kit. Containing items like sanitary pads and soap, these kits help to maintain a woman's health and hygiene in a camp environment.
President Obama hopes to allow as many as 10,000 Syrian refugees to come into the U.S.
Debate over how to handle the millions of refugees is also raging here in Iowa.
We don't want to become like Europe, where they let all these refugees in.
If I win, they're going back. They're going back.
I believe that the immigration situation we have in the United States is an existential threat to America's future.
It breaks my heart that Trump wants to not let any in America. And so how can you say that these people don't deserve a safe life?